There is research, however, that shows that long-form reading, and long-form reading means 10,000 words, which is approximately an essay or a very, very large article, actually activates other parts of your brain and is very beneficial for you in many ways. It is good for your mental health, but some research even says that it's good for your, obviously, education, socioeconomic status. Levels of crime go down, and they say that even longevity goes up if you read long-form text. Good morning, my friends, and I think with my calming energy, maybe I'm not the best speaker to start this morning, but we'll manage. Thank you, everyone who came here in this rainy morning. They promised sunshine in the afternoon, so don't despair. So thank you very much for coming. I'm very excited to share this talk with you because I have to be honest with you, this is the first time I am covering this topic, and it is exciting. It is the topic that makes me super passionate, and I've noticed these few days before this talk, I have been speaking on this same very topic there, outside in the corridors with people over and over again, so I think it's exciting. But first I want to ask you the question, and I want you to think along. How many books do you think you read a year? And I'm going to ask actually to raise your hand if you read 10 books or more. If you read 20 books or more? 50? Oh. So I know one participant in Mindvalley University told me yesterday she reads 70 books. I made my own calculations, and if you were to read every waking hour of your day, you would read approximately 730 books in a year. But I think it would be a form of torture. So I'll show you a number, actually, instead. This is the number. It's not very much verified, but this is the number of how many books an average American reads in a year, 12.6. So 10 books is good. Now, I want to ask, who of you doesn't read books at all? I do not know if it's logical that you are here or if it's ironical that you are here. But it's fine as well, because you see, we live in a different world. And I know that some people don't read books because what they read is news, articles, social media, maybe ChatGPT. I have a friend who reads a lot of ChatGPT. So there are different ways to read. Now, I do want to talk about books, though, because there's a lot of science behind books. First of all, neuroimaging shows that when you read a text, the same parts of your brain activate as if you're doing that activity. So, example, if you're reading about a very detailed account of how somebody is running a marathon, actually the same parts of your brain activate as if you are running a marathon, which is amazing and doesn't mean that you should read books on exercises instead of going to the gym, because your muscles don't activate, just your brain activates. But the point of this research is that reading is actually very engaging activity. So not only do you get new ideas, but you also get new experiences, something which doesn't happen when you, for example, listen to an audiobook or watch a TED Talk. It's a more passive form of consumption of information, and you do get wonderful ideas, but your brain doesn't activate to the same level as when you read a book. Now, you can read other forms of text and still read, like, for example, I'm reading my slide right now. There is research, however, that shows that long-form reading, and long-form reading means 10,000 words, which is approximately an essay or a very, very large article, actually activates other parts of your brain and is very beneficial for you in many ways. It is good for your mental health, not surprising. It actually helps you to focus better. It's really good for your, a lot of cognitive abilities, in fact, but some research even says that it's good for your, obviously, education, socioeconomic status. Levels of crime go down, and they say that even longevity goes up if you read long-form text. Now, there's a lot of research about that because we do want to understand how our brain works, but the interesting thing is that if you read 100 pages or more, which is pretty much an average book, that actually is crucial for your critical thinking. It really develops your critical thinking. So what I'm trying to say is that reading books is not the thing of the past. And yes, we do notice that the way we consume information is very different nowadays because we are used to fragmented information, this bite-sized information, because that's how news, for example, work, or TV series work this way. They work on the idea that you get bite-sized information with a cliffhanger, and because of that, you want to actually know what's happening next. It creates those loops in our, brain mostly, where we get fed, we get good feeling when we get to know the next bit of information, so we get hooked on that information. And of course, our technology does affect the way we consume information, but the point is that the good, old-fashioned reading of books is still good for you, no matter what happens in the world. Now, sorry. I'm sorry, the audio people. So, good old-fashioned way of reading books is still really awesome. And the question is, but do people actually read books? Statistics shows that we sell more books than ever before, and these numbers go into billions. Some numbers say that we sell about 22 billion books a year. The numbers go up. Now, because people buy more books doesn't mean that they read more books, because some people buy books to decorate their shelves and decorate their, interior. I buy books a little bit compulsively. I buy more books than I can read, and I think that's some kind of form of, distortion. But I love to, for example, I have 5 collections of all of Jane Austen's novels in different printings, just because I like Jane Austen. It doesn't mean that I have to read each of the collections. So we buy books for different reasons. It reminds me of that silly joke, and excuse me if my joke is a bit silly. An illiterate man was asked, illiterate man shared that, I wrote a book. His friends were like, but how did you write a book you can't read? And he says, I'm not a reader, I'm a writer. So I think we live a little bit in this world, because the fact that there is a lot of offer of books, of course, doesn't mean that we read more, because everything shows that we actually read less. We maybe read a lot of books, we never finish them. So would you want to guess how many books we actually see every year, new books? I'll give you the number for personal growth, because this is what I'm interested in. And maybe before I give you the number, I'll tell you a little bit of a backstory. So last year, I published my book, Becoming Flawsome. And I have to tell you that the book publishing is it's like a marathon. It's a really long, anticlimactic journey. You first write it for a long time, then you edit it for a long time, then you feel really hurt because editors butcher your book, and you're like, it's my book. So it's a long process, and then the marketing process happens, and then, it again eats up your ego, because you have to sell your book to people, and then you maybe get your, in my case, Wall Street Journal #1. And I remember when they announced Wall Street Journal #1, by that moment, I was so exhausted that I think they wanted to give me a surprise. I was in LA at a party. They showed the Wall Street Journal #1, and I looked at it, and then I came back and I thought, what was I going to say? I didn't even laugh or smile or anything. I didn't do what I was expected to do, because it's such a long journey. And other industries, they have their cool places. Like, for example, if you create movies, you have Oscars, you have Cannes, you have Sundance, you have a lot of different festivals where you get acknowledged. When you're in music industry, there are like music awards. When you're in book industry, all you have, except New York Times bestseller, which is really, really hard to get, by the way, except New York Times bestseller, what you have is Pulitzer Prize and Nobel. And trust me, I think it's easier to get Oscar than to get Nobel Prize. So I felt so demotivated. By the end of the launch process, I was thinking, I feel accomplished, but it's like with children, you deliver the child and you're like, finally, and then it begins. You don't sleep at night, you are like, you don't know what's happened to your life. So sometime after the launch, I felt that I want to do something, and I want to change this whole situation where your book publishing journey is very lonely. Yes, you have a lot of people who are helping you, but at the end of the day, you feel like, so what happened? So I'm a best-selling author. I've interviewed 400 people. Everybody's a best-selling author nowadays. So I wanted to start a Mindvalley Book Club. And we started a Mindvalley Book Club because we thought, we want to know what are the good books which are being published in our industry. And maybe if my dream comes true next year, I'm going to give awards for the best books, because I really think that we as an industry require a little bit more recognition, because book writing is a very different format. A book is a rite of passage for an author, because it's very different. I have interviewed, as I said, 400 people, at least maybe 500, really remarkable authors, speakers. But when you talk to people about their books, it's like about their child, because it's such a different thing. I've recorded 5 programs, but I care about my book much more than I care about everything else that I've done as an author. So I want to recognize authors for this mammoth effort, which is why we started the Mindvalley Book Club. For now, it's just me and Masha. Masha, can you wave at people, please? So I focus on self-help, because that's my specialty. Masha mostly focuses on business, and the reason is because I am very critical in self-help, and Masha is very critical in business. So I'll give you the number, how many books get published every single week. I once calculated 2,000 books every single week in self-help and business category. The good news is that overwhelming majority of those books is rubbish, so we don't have to focus on them. But we do read about 50, 60 books, or we go through about 50, 60 books every single week, and then we pick, just for you to understand the mechanics behind this presentation, out of the 50, 60 books, we pick 3 to 5 books every week that we actually contact the author and ask them to send us their digital galley. Then we look into the digital galley, and we invite one person for an interview. So once a week, I invite one person for an interview out of 2,000 books. So it's quite a choice. So when I tell you that I interview the best authors in personal growth industry, and I'm talking about new authors because we only focus on new releases, then I'm not lying to you. It's quite tough. So my presentation today is based on the books and the authors that I've interviewed this year, not all of them, because I only picked 7 lessons. Now, another question, who of you has ever wanted to write a book? Yes, you know, when I started writing my book, the question that I had, but everything has been said already. And it's true, because in the classical sense, we think that self-help books started in the turn of the 19th and 20th century, you know, such people as Dale Carnegie or like Napoleon Hill. Actually, that's not true. I think Dante's Divine Comedy is pretty much a self-help book, because he's talking about how to be a better person. Or you maybe don't know, but in the 18th century, a very popular didactical book was Fordyce's Sermons, which taught ladies how to be a proper lady. But even before that, ancient Greek and ancient Chinese philosophers, in essence, I consider them the forefathers of personal growth industry. Because if you look at current personal growth industry, you will see a lot of books about Stoicism, for example. But the original Stoics were Greeks. So if you actually read Plato, then he does talk, his book is in essence a personal growth book. It's just presented in a different way, in a way in which is maybe not very familiar to us. People who study this, they say that actually the first personal growth ideas come from the ancient Egyptian writings. Haven't read those, so I can't confirm. But the point is that people have been sharing these ideas for thousands of years. Thousands of years. Is there anything new under the sky? And I always wonder that. Well, would you want to guess what people write about in personal growth industry? What are the most common topics? You can just shout out, just to have a little bit of success. Money. That's more Masha's side of the business. Well, I did this little word cloud to you. It is a little censored. I removed all the journals, coloring books, planners, and things like that. Things which were not, strictly speaking, full volume books. By the way, with the advent of AI, a lot of books are AI generated, which adds to the 2000. But not surprisingly, memoir or autobiographic, we actually just use the word memoir. The autobiographic approach is the most common in personal growth. A lot of people write about their own experiences, which is kind of natural. Now, what I want to share with you today are the 7 most exciting and interesting ideas which I learned from the books of 2024. So, as I said, we only focus on personal growth, on new releases, partially because I just cannot fathom going through everything that has been written in 2,000 years before me. So I'd rather focus on the things which are happening right now. So the first idea that I want to share is this. We control nothing, but we influence everything. And before I go into this book, I want to explain to you why the first slide after the lesson is going to be about the author. You know, I'm one of those people who reads an interesting book and then never remembers what was the name of the author who wrote this book and who was that author. Now, when I have interviewed the authors, I suddenly realized that understanding the person on a deeper level, seeing them as a human being, actually adds so much to the books, because some of the books in my list have been surprising to me. The author added so much value to what they have written. So I think it's really important that we remember people behind the books. We actually notice, and the benefit of my work is that I get to interview those authors because they're contemporaries, they're the freshly released authors. So the first author, this idea comes from Brian Klaas. He also, incidentally, was my first interview. An amazing person, a professor of international politics, or global politics, in a London university. And in his book, I actually have to use my phone because my eyesight doesn't permit me to see what's happening there. So in his book, he goes very deeply explaining this idea, why whatever you do actually leaves a mark on the world history. But with that said, we can't control what's happening to us. And it's a very interesting concept, because what he talks about is that, you know, even the fact that you are right now sitting in this chair has been a miraculous row of events, sometimes random events, that had led you to even exist, led us, humanity, to even exist. Now, his whole book is, of course, dedicated to that, but the main idea is that, but for small changes, the world that we know it, the way we know it right now, would have been very, very different. Now, Brian Klaas actually talks about historical events, significant historical events. He starts his book with the bombing of Hiroshima and how this city got bombed rather than Kyoto, which was initially planned to be bombed. And he goes deeper into that, which is a very, very, very interesting philosophical concept. Now, I have to say that this book is much more philosophical than it is didactical, but I love philosophical books because you think along with them. And another thing that I had to mention to you, that these quotes are not strictly speaking quotes, because I slightly simplified them for you. Otherwise, it would be a little bit too overwhelming. Also, try not to read them, because I use them just to keep track of the thankless task of regurgitating other people's ideas. Now, with that said, what Brian Klaas also says, that because we can't control what's happening to us, a lot of the times this need and the desire to simplify the world, to find a certain very simple ways to explain the world, it actually backfires at us. Because very often when a complex system is being pushed to simplification and you're trying to see the cause and effect very clearly where it doesn't exist, you actually push that system to a breaking point. So the point of this whole thing is that, yes, we can't control what's happening to the world, and the worst thing is that by trying to control it, we make it worse. And it may seem like a downer, but the surprising thing, when I was interviewing Brian, he's a very, very positive person. The idea he wants to convey is that despite the fact that we don't have control over the world, everything that we do still matters, because every step that you do in your life actually can have repercussions so much later, and you don't even know who is going to be affected by what you're doing. And now, this is the quote which is not Brian's per se, but I love this quote, because he says, in the end, he says that no matter why the world is the way it is, even if you can't explain it, the best thing you can do is to love the people around you who are there to be loved. And Brian really conveys this message that, this whole uncontrollability, uncertainty, it's a call to enjoy what you have right now in this present moment, because that's the only thing that we have. Now, it is, as I said, it's a philosophical book, and that leads me to the next wonderful idea, which maybe isn't new, but the idea about that you can't really be too focused on your one purpose. And this is something that we do a lot. We try to find the passion. You know, you go out for a party and they ask, so what's your passion? And I always get so lost. Like, I have so many passions. You know, I'm also a farmer, actually. I have sheep and Highland cows, and I can very passionately talk about that, but today I'll talk about books. This idea comes from Guy Kawasaki, who probably doesn't need a lot of introduction. If I were to replace his bio, yes, he is the chief evangelist of Canva. He was the first chief evangelist of Apple. In fact, he came up with this term, evangelist. But if I were to replace his long bio, I would say a legend, because he's truly a legend. Now, I have to say a little explanation. In his latest book, which was just launched, Guy Kawasaki talks to Gen Z, which is exciting for me. I think it's really cool. So he talks to Gen Z. So his book is written in that way, and when you read it, you might think it's very, it starts with very basic truths, but it's very fast-paced, very straightforward. And what's characteristic to Guy, he's very straightforward in your face. So he has opinions, and he's not afraid to share them. And I asked him, he said, you know, Kristina, I'm 70 years old, not yet, but 70. I just can't be bothered. If somebody doesn't like me, I don't care. In fact, I know the responsibility. I have the responsibility to express my opinions the way they are. So please don't be shocked by his quote, because he says that when he hears people talk about you have to find your passion, he throws up a little bit. But the point is that passion is not something that you just find. This is something that you develop. You develop and you work on that. Now, this idea is just one of the ideas that he shares in his book. This idea doesn't reflect the whole book, just one idea I wanted to bring out. What Guy Kawasaki suggests instead is that you do things that you're interested about. And you just do a lot of things which you're interested about, and then from those interests, you develop passions. In fact, in our conversation, he talks about the younger people that we force them to look for their passions, but their job is to scratch their itches. But I would say it's true for us as well. Guy, for example, picked up surfing at the age of 43, because his children do that. Now, that leads me to the next idea, which I want to share with you, because that next idea actually supports Guy Kawasaki's idea. In fact, it was so funny, because I had these interviews back to back, and both of them were saying exactly the same thing. Stop forcing your children to know their passion before they even have finished their school. And this idea comes, so the idea is that we infect everyone with anxiety, but that supportive thought comes from this wonderful author, Alison Escalante. She's a pediatrician, also a professor of pediatrics. And in her book, Sai Sees Start, which is on parenting, she talks about how this high anxiety parenting, which is very common nowadays, actually is not because of the parents being silly, but because the whole society is very high anxiety. So because we live in the society of high anxiety, we actually translate it in ourselves. And then she goes further, and she, actually, this is a little sidestep. I found it just super interesting. So there's research that says that high-pressure environment for your children, for example, if you push your children for achievement, is equal to trauma from, let's say, from such things as discrimination or, violence and stuff like that. So when you pressure your children for achievement, in essence, it's as bad for their mental health, for adolescent mental health, as if you had a very bad family situation. Like, for example, you were violent or you had alcoholism in your family. It's just as traumatic for children. And I found it really, really striking, because when I lived in Asia, I know that the pressure for good results in Asia is so high that the suicide rate among teenagers, especially those who are finishing school, are like way higher than they should be. Now, the quote that I like the most from this author is this. It reminds me a little bit of Mark Twain. But basically, she says that too much time spent achieving gets in the way of other important developmental milestones. So the point, and actually there are a lot of cross ideas between the different books, you will notice, from different authors who actually don't know each other. But the idea is that we're sometimes trying too hard to control the situation, trying too hard to create something for us, which we think something that we want, and we create more problems by doing that. Now, what Alison Escalante in the end is trying to convey is that if our children are anxious, it's because these are the behaviors that they see from us, they learn from us, and very often they mirror our own anxiety. So she brings it all back to the parents, saying that, first of all, you have to see what your children need, but more than that, you have to be comfortable with what you see. And what you see might not be what you like. So do you, as a parent, have the capabilities to deal with what you see and you don't like? And that takes me to the next author and the next great idea about regulating your emotions. I know it might sound a little bit shocking, don't regulate your emotions, and it comes from a very wonderful writer. I enjoyed the interview with her, Julie Christensen. She is a psychotherapist, mostly. A Rise of Rage is her book. And, well, what she talks about is that we all express anger, and the anger is this one emotion which is very tabooed. Especially in our industry, we actually try to replace it and push it out and replace it with any other emotion which is much more palatable. Now, the problem with our society is that very often we explain anger not in terms of the emotion that we are feeling, but in terms of aggressive behaviors that we see. Although anger doesn't necessarily lead to aggressive behavior, so while we try to say that aggressive behavior or aggressive expression of anger is not good, we say that we have to suppress anger, whereas anger has actually been forced for good in many, many cases. Whatever, let's say, non-profit course that you take, very often it comes out of anger. So what Julie Christensen suggests is that rather than regulating the emotion, you have to understand where the anger comes from. And not regulate the emotion, but resolve the problem. Resolve the problem where, that has given rise to this emotion. Sorry, since I'm regurgitating other people's ideas, I have to check the quotes. And yes, here's another idea which is actually crossing with the first book that I shared by Brian Klaas, where she says that among her patients, so this is Julie Christensen, she says amongst her patients, she has seen a lot of the cases when trauma happens because a person had to face the situation that didn't go the way they were expected. That loss of control, that realization that I can't control what's happening has created a lot of trauma. And to sum up that book, since this is actually a very practical book, what she says is that you are free to feel what you feel. The question is, how do you express yourself and which actions you choose? Now, your actions, you can choose based on your values. So there's nothing wrong with anger, nothing wrong at all. It's a very natural and basic emotion. And don't try to regulate it. What you might want to regulate are the causes that created that anger, and also how you express it. And now I'll do a little bit of jump, so the next book is not, strictly speaking, tied in the logical sequence to the previous books, but I just found this book also really fascinating. It's about habits and rituals, but more it's about rituals. So the idea is that habits automate and rituals animate. And this book comes from this wonderful professor of business administration in the Harvard Business School, Michael Norton. And he has actually researched happiness and behavior for a really long time. And as a result of his research into happiness, he started focusing on rituals, because the idea between habits and rituals is that habits are the automated actions that we create this automation into our life so that we optimize our life. So create good habits, get rid of bad habits. The idea of that is to create structure around your life. Now, rituals, on the other side, they give juice and emotion to your life. So, again, I don't want to go too deep in the book, because if you find any of the books interesting, I do strongly encourage you to read them, because believe it or not, I've read every single book. That's my promise in Mindvalley Book Club. So the point here is that very often we disregard the emotional factor of our good habits. For example, if you want to have the good habit to exercise, to eat well, you're so focused on the outcome that this habit becomes more of a necessity, or you have to do that, but you do not enjoy that. So this is what automates your life. Now, rituals, they give the pleasure to your life. In the words of Michael Norton, habits are about what you do, and rituals about how you do. This is not Michael Norton's quote, it's someone else's quote, but I just found it hilarious. I've optimized my life to be as long and unpleasant as possible. But that's actually what I've seen quite a bit. So that's actually, if you've done that, rituals are the answer. You can actually ritualize some parts of your good habits and bring pleasure to them. Now, to give a twist to this whole thing, there's this one part of the book which I really found exciting. So there is a lot of research that shows that people revert to rituals when the situation is not under their control. You see, the same topic, control, comes back in. So when we can't control the situations, we actually create rituals. And that's actually quite logical. A lot of religions come the rituals comes with the fear of the unknown, of the uncertainty of death. And there's a lot of anthropological research actually that proves the case, but I'll share a very funny study that actually Michael Norton shares in his book about pigeons. So pigeons were held in a cage and they were given food, but there was also a panel. So a pigeon had to do certain moves and then the food would come out. So the pigeons learned the right sequence of food very quickly. Well, that's nothing new. Animals actually learn certain behaviors to satisfy whatever needs they have. But then they gave a twist to that experiment. Everything was the same, but the food didn't come out as a result of any sequence of actions. The food came out at random. And then they watched the pigeons, and the pigeons did all sorts of funny things. So some pigeons just turned around a few times, and they were expecting the food to come. And other pigeons did, like this, gif. So actually, the pigeons behaved in all sorts of different ways, but at some point, it gave them food, and then they believed that this is the action which actually gives them food. And the funny thing is that we do the same. We humans, I know we're not pigeons, but we do the same, and very often we forgot about that. So, wonderful book, light reading, still very, maybe you have noticed already by now, I love academic books. But in addition to academic books, I like good writing. And the next book that gives me actually goosebumps. And talking about habits, rituals, and rituals mostly, and rituals that we revert to when we have anxiety, when we can't control the situation. One of those rituals is food, intake of food. In fact, food is a very widespread ritual, and sometimes even if we think it's about health, we ritualize taking food. And this next book comes about eating disorders. And if you don't relate to that, just wait. Soon you will all relate to that. So basically, the author in our interview, she's a wonderful author. She's a young person. She just finished school, pretty much. She's an essayist, Emmeline Klein. And she wrote a very raw book. I had hard times reading it in the beginning because she doesn't filter her language. And basically, she takes you on a journey about eating disorders. When I read this book, I suddenly realized how prevalent eating disorders are. In fact, I have started noticing symptoms of disordered relations to the food in myself and in my environment. Now, she also brings statistics, of course. Statistics says that, if I'm not mistaken, 62% of young people want to lose weight. 3 out of 4 women want to lose weight. We want to lose weight. That's just the way it is. That's a picture that we all want to emulate, the image of a beautiful, lean body, because it has been idealized. It has been granted with the notion that this is healthy, this is good, this is pure, and that's what we strive for. Unfortunately, when it comes to body dysmorphia, the problem is that when you're on this path, you're not even realizing that you're having a problem. So body dysmorphia is when you try to fix your body, and the more you fix it, the more you want to try. So you might think, I just need to fix this one little thing, lose a few pounds, I'll be good. But the problem with body dysmorphia is that when you go on that path, you will never be good. Now, that's exactly what Emmeline Klein is talking about, is that, well, actually, first I'll mention this, that it's really, first of all, with eating disorders, they're being underdiagnosed. Because according to current medical convention, we very often equate eating disorder to either very classical signs of bulimia, where you vomit after consuming food or you take laxatives, or we equate it to low weight. Now, eating disorder is not a weight problem. It's a mental health problem. And I have unfortunately censored this quote way beyond what I wanted, but she brings out another ailment of our society where patients are not believed when they come and they say, I have a problem. And she's talking about this guy who actually, this psychologist is the one who coined the idea of bulimia, or actually noticed bulimia for the first time, because he worked in the 1960s. So she talks about how he judged his clients who had anorexia, all signs of anorexia, not being anorexic because they were not thin enough. Apparently, there are overweight people who are malnourished, are actually having anorexia, but we don't recognize it because their weight is not what we think it should be. So there is a lot of undiagnosed eating disorder going on, but the worst thing, the thing that really terrified me, was the statistics of recovery. So it's proven that people who actually have diagnosed eating disorder, be it bulimia or anorexia or a multitude of other eating disorders, they actually don't have chances. It's like drug addiction. If you have a drug addiction in your environment, you know what a burden it is, because we have understanding that it's almost impossible to get out of those conditions. So eating disorder has pretty much similar rates of recovery and similarly high rates of mortality as drug addiction, except drug addiction is a little bit more recognized problem than eating disorder, because we actually idealize people who have eating disorders. I saw the other day, when I was interviewing this lady, Emmeline Klein, I saw a video on the internet where they were, and I'm sorry for bringing up a specific name, but Victoria Beckham. They were fascinated. This person who wrote the video, she said, it was a he actually, he said, what an amazing strength. She has this routine, she eats like this, she does like this, and I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, but this is eating disorder speaking, and we are idealizing the result of it. Whereas girls, as early as teenagers, are pushed onto this path, and then they have no choice of recovery. And here what Emmeline is saying in this quote is that the problem of our society is that we actually villainize people who have those problems. And we treat them as enemies, not as patients. I have extra more quotes for this book, and honestly, I have 5 times as many quotes in my notes because I just didn't know what to show you. This book is shattering. Mostly because it's just pointing how messed up our society is. Now, in this last quote, the idea that I want to share is that what Emmeline is saying is that this is the system, the society that creates this problem. We try to escape that, but we are constantly bombarded with the opposite message. So here she's talking about how so Emmeline had a bulimia, so she had episodes of binging and then going back to trying to slim down. How after you have misbehaved, you go and you compensate for that misbehavior, and you become this perfect client for the system. Which leads me to the last idea I wanted to share with you, which actually comes from dating apps. Yeah, I know. I am actually not on dating apps, despite being single for the past, 5 years. I still haven't dared, but after this book, I don't know if I do. So basically, dating apps have pixelized our relationships. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful author. You wouldn't believe it. Trina Orchard, she's a professor of, God, I forgot this word, anthropology, professor of anthropology. I was shocked when I was interviewing her. I did, sometimes you read the book and you don't know what to expect. So when I read the book, I was slightly like, ooh. And then she turned out to be such a sweet academic person. Very soft-spoken, very cool. So she talks about the same. She says that the way she has been on a multitude of dating apps. So she's an anthropologist who's researching gender and sexuality. And also she loves sex, of which she writes very generously in her book, which is also surprising. But this is the new generation of personal growth books. And God, I'm so passionate about that. I could talk about that for a long time. But basically, back to serious talk. She says the same. She has tried all sorts of dating apps. She started with Bumble, which has the appeal of being a feminist app. But what she says that a lot of the times the system creates solutions for us, which rather than solve our problem, make the problem worse, and then get us hooked on those systems to solve the problem. And that's the problem with the dating apps as well, because the way they work, they do not empower. And ironically, Trina had found her love of her life on dating apps, and I know a lot of people who have, but the journey to that positive solution was excruciating at times. And a lot of the problems that our society has right now, like we talk about that technology has changed the way we consume the information. I said earlier that I'm not on dating apps, but I have experienced, when I was reading that book, I have experienced behaviors which are supposed to be only part of the dating app environment. I've experienced them outside on the streets and the bars, in Facebook. So this crossover of how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves, even if you're not in the dating pool, we all get the effects of that. So the thing with dating apps is that they dehumanize people. We see them as JPEGs. Because it's a numbers game, very often the behaviors are very erratic, a lot of ghosting, gaslighting, this kind of behaviors which are actually painful for our ego. They all stem from the idea that we are separated from the humanity. We have the screen, we have the pixels, but we don't realize that there are real humans behind those pixels. What she suggests is that let's not fight what we have, but let's create the new reality for ourselves. Basically, she suggests that despite all of that, human relations are still absolutely precious for the humanity of it. And we should fight back the system. In fact, as a few closing ideas that I want to share with you, there were two very fun things that I've noticed about contemporary self-help books. The new generation. I call them new generation self-help books because they combine both the lightness of conversation that we are used to from, let's say, the end of the 20th century self-help books, the ones which were very easy to read, and they were very didactical. I remember when I went to my publisher, they said, that's right, but you have to explain it very, very simply. I call it the effect of, all those books for dummies. Thank God these books are dying out, because I think it's not serving for us as humanity, all those books for dummies. We are capable of understanding complicated philosophical concepts, and not just that. It's good for us. It's good for our critical thinking. So I encourage you guys to read books, and these new generation books, they do have a little bit of the slightness of the end of the 20th century books, but they also have very substantial research and proof, empirical proof of what people are saying. So the two interesting things that I've noticed, one of them is that a lot of authors who come from their academic background actually say how easy it is to manipulate research and data. I forgot to add this quote, but it was such a funny quote that, if you torture data long enough, it will confess. And that's something that I've noticed in a lot of books. They actually also tell you how to look critically at what you're reading. And another an idea which is very dear for me, a lot of feminist messages have started appearing in books on topics which are not strictly speaking feminist. And I think it's very important because we live in a world made by man for men. And that's just the way it is. And I'm very happy to see those messages. And when I was interviewing Trina Orchard, I said, but F word is very often so hard to take for people. And she said, but maybe we do need a scary word. Maybe we shouldn't redefine it. Maybe we should be brave to say what we think. So with that said, I want to invite you to the Mindvalley Book Club. We haven't done an official launch, because when me and Masha embarked on this journey, we had no idea what's going to happen. What we knew is that Amazon is the god. If your book is not on Amazon, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the universe. So we went on Amazon and we made a search, all the books that appeared in the past 30 days, and then we got shocked. Now, of course, we are very good at that, so 2,000 books don't daunt us. But we created this Mindvalley Book Club so that we can bring to you the best authors in the personal growth industry that are just being launched. So these ideas are not old. And this is the first time I'm actually making a presentation on Mindvalley Book Club. We have created a Mindvalley Book Club lounge in the back of the Cauldron Hall. And we're going to interview some of the speakers who come on this stage and have books. So we're going to interview them throughout the whole event. The program is in the app, Mindvalley University app, if you want to attend some of the interviews. These interviews are not meant for audience per se, but you're welcome to come. In fact, if you like this author, if you have their book, you're welcome to come even with your book and get it signed, because we want to create this book world here as well. If Mindvalley missed anything, it was the book world, and now we have the book world, because it's different. So come there. And also, later today at 12:15, so all the sessions, because it's in the Cauldron Hall, all the sessions there will be happening during lunch. And I do not know what the rules are, but maybe you can have a quick lunch or bring your lunch in your bag. But today at 12:15, I'm going to have a little Q&A session if you're interested in publishing industry, and I've experienced it through and through. If you want to ask any questions, I'll be there to talk to you. 12:15 today, Cauldron Hall at the back. Other than that, you can sign up. We send weekly newsletters with 3 to 5 books, best books about personal growth, and weekly invitations for an interview with the best author. And thank you. I'm done.
Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, thank you so much. I actually have a question for you.
Okay.
Because you author yourself and you're reading so many books. What's the best way to work through the book? Because, how do you do it? Do you write something in a book, or do you take time after the book and you will just analyze it later, or how do you do it? What's the best way to get all the content?
So I was researching the reading as science, and there are different ways you read books. There's reading where you work through text for information. So you kind of try to get the information of the text. There's a slow reading format. There are different ways of how you read books. And a long time ago, I came across an article by one French philologist who said that we have different relationships with books, and all relationships are valid. Some books are to be savored and read slowly from cover to cover. Some books are just to be skimmed. So when it comes to Mindvalley Book Club books, we of course have our tricks and ways, because we have to read books for work. Actually, I'm probably the first person who read books professionally. I read them for money. I get paid for reading books. But I would say trust yourself. What do you want to get out of the book? I have a stack of books that I have to read for work, but I also love reading books for pleasure, and these books I savor. So the books that I read for pleasure, I read on the plane, because on the plane I like to switch off. I read before I go to sleep, and I like to read every word, and if I wandered away, I come back and I read every word again. I read Lord of the Rings twice, like this, accidentally. But when it comes to personal growth books, depending on how they're written, like the book by Emmeline Klein about eating disorders, I couldn't read it like I would read personal growth books. I couldn't diagonally read it. A lot of personal growth books are structured in a way which is easy for you to understand. Again, the dummification of our industry. For God's sake, we're smart people. Why? But they will make it very easy for you to just skim. So in a good day, you can skim a book in half an hour, and you're like, I'm
half
done
an
with
hour?
that. Of course.
The whole book?
Of course.
Wow.
And Vision will tell you there are techniques, photo reading, speed reading, Jim Quick, There are different ways to read books. What I'm trying to say is that every relationship with book is valid. You don't have to feel guilty or compelled if you took up the book. You got what you needed out of the book, put it aside, it's fine. It's okay, it's like dating.
Thank you, Kristina.
Thank you.